The okay, I think that's all of them. Let me refresh it really quick. Well, so do you think, from your perspective, going into family court, would you advise young men not to have children?
I think if you have children in a conjugal relationship, you are in the family court system.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I advise men not to have children in conjugal relationships.
Okay. Um,
Adoption might be an option. You don't want to have somebody on the other side that can sue you and take your children from you.
yeah. What or surrogacy, I think, is an option.
That's becoming incredibly popular. I had a bunch of my followers from X contact me
Mhm.
last year, and I went down to Austin. I met with about a dozen of them, and all of them are going to Mexico and Argentina to get surrogates.
Yeah.
There's a huge movement in the UK that's building. There's actually companies being formed to help men do this in the UK. And it's all just a direct and here's what they told me. I'm just, I'm kind of like the guy just passing along. I'm too old to probably do this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But they basically said, look, this is not something people can argue us out of.
Mhm.
We watched our fathers living out of their cars. We watched our fathers be made homeless. We watched our mothers take us away from our fathers and not let us see our. We saw what happened to them. You can't like argue. You can't give me a religious argument and talk me out of that. You can't give me some reasonable way to like. They physically observed it with their own eyes. They know what actually happens and what can happen, and they want to avoid it. And I think they're wise to do that.
And I think the country doesn't know what to do, because if men aren't paying child support and alimony, what will they do with all of these women that have just made really bad life decisions in terms of debt, having kids with guys that don't want to be that don't want to be
Yes.
like, what I think the question like the country is asking is, what will they like? They don't want to see homeless women. Like, they would rather see homeless men, even if it's not the fault of their own, than women.
There's no doubt about that. I think that most homelessness is driven by drug use and mental problems.
Hmm.
But I think all the other homelessness, other than those things, are driven by the family court system. I'll tell you how it happens. I used to go down to Dallas County because I got so pissed off about it.
Hmm.
They'll just line up black men up on the fourth floor in Dallas County of the courthouse. The Title 4D courts are up there.
Hmm.
They'll just line them up. The line goes down the stairway and out the building, and they just literally have a pipeline sending all of them into the jail for not paying child support. And what happens is they roll off the Title 4D program and they roll on to the prison reimbursement program, which is $93 a day.
Hmm.
So the state, what happens when you enter the system is you become a ward of the state and a moneymaker for the state. They're happy to just throw you in jail. These men get tired of going 6 months in jail, a year out, 6 months in jail, a year out on child support issues. So what they do is they just burn their ID card and become homeless and live free. And I've talked to many men downtown Dallas who've done just that. So it's driving huge social problems, and I don't think we, as a society, yet have the ability to hold women responsible for themselves. And until that day comes, the system is such that young men, you just can't enter the system. You cannot contemplate even entering the system
And not
because it will completely destroy you.
and not to mention the men that get drug problems, because I'll interview guys and their whole lives are destroyed. They lost their job. They're
Yes,
living out of their car. They don't even want to make more money because the court will just increase child support. So it's
that's correct.
they don't even have a will to live. And so, some of them, the drug problems stemmed from like having contact with
Mhm.
family court.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I would actually say that it is not a metaphorical form of enslavement.
Mhm.
It is actual enslavement with punishment. I mean, they beat you and put you in a cage if you don't do what they tell you to do.
Mhm.
Like it's literal enslavement, and all of the pathologies that you would expect of a slave appear with men out of family court.
And what I get frustrated with is the religious, like the traditional conservatives will shame men for not like manning up and like the way they phrase it, it's like man up and marry these women, but the
Yes.
state's pointing a gun to their head. So
Oh yeah,
I mean, for
absolutely.
me, 18 years is a long time. Or even if she does it after a couple of years, 10 years, 12 years. I mean, that can completely destroy your life. So if you're 30 and that happens to you, you're not getting off until you're 48.
Yeah, your prospects of running a business or having a retirement are going to be destroyed. And it's not just that either. It's, let's say you decide to stay in the marriage the way these trads want people to. Let's
Mhm,
say you stay in these marriages, right?
mhm,
I know men that are actually in this position. These guys are alpha male types too. They step and fetch for their wives. Whatever their wives tell them to do, they do. You know why? Because they're going to lose millions of dollars in their business. They're going to be homeless. They're not going to see their kids. Their kids' lives are going to be destroyed. So it puts men in a position where in a marriage they don't have any control. These trads don't get it. Like
mhm.
when you marry, you may think you have control, but the actual physical legal control is all from the wife. So there is no way in our current system to have a traditional marriage with a man who's head of the household. It's impossible.
Well, and the challenge I had was at first I thought it was maybe a certain type of woman that men, because men might hear your story. And if she had previous kids, they might say, oh, well,
Mhm.
of course that's going to happen. You married a single mother, right?
Right.
But that's not even a deterrent. Like I would meet women, like one of the worst divorces I ever saw was a woman that was in a traditional Latin mass community. She was from Michael Knowles's actual community in California. And that was
Yes.
the worst, like, that was probably the worst divorce story. Minus you actually might, ugh, yours is probably worse, but right up there, right? One of the worst I'd
Okay.
ever seen, where
Right.
like his kid didn't even speak his same language. And she was from Eastern Europe. She was at a
Wow.
traditional, like, what more did they want? She was young. And it's like, even I would find that women from traditional Muslim countries, because I was in London when I started this, so I would find
Yes.
women from literal like the parts of the world they say the women are better at, which they might be, but I would find the same like patterns. It was
Of
like as
course.
soon as they got leverage, it was just too easy to do.
I've submitted this before. I've said, look, if you gave men the same power in
Mhm.
family court, I'm pretty sure men would misuse it on a grand scale as well. If you give people this kind of power, this unilateral power, it's going to happen. You brought up Michael Knowles. I watched your interview with him twice, and I don't normally do things like that.
Mhm.
And I was fascinated by it because there was a subterfuge going on that Knowles knew about.
Mhm.
When Knowles used the word marriage, he meant holy matrimony.
Mhm.
He meant the sacrament of marriage. When you were talking about marriage, you're talking about the marriage that we all have to live with in the legal system,
Mhm.
right? And what I thought, the conversation that I think Knowles averted by that little ploy
Mhm.
was how the current legal system destroys holy matrimony and how it's not really possible under this legal system. It basically creates a situation where every incentive of the woman is to sin. And we know that there was a time. Hey, Pearl, call me crazy.
Mhm.
There was a time I remember when conservatives used to understand incentives. They talked about incentives in the welfare system and all that.
Mhm.
But suddenly, when we talk about incentives when it comes to marriage, they act like there's no incentives for women to divorce. And it's just completely ridiculous. The
Mhm.
trads drive me insane.
Well, and it would drive me crazy because they would always want to go to the "you're not Catholic enough" argument.
Right.
And I'm not attempting to attack the religion. It's just I'm not blind. Like I grew up in a Catholic area. I would say I went to Catholic school my whole life, and
Right.
I saw women do the same thing. Like, did you want me to not
Yes.
notice? Like I don't. And then it's always, well, if you went to a traditional Latin mass community, like if you went to my special church, And then it was like
Yeah.
2 weeks after that interview, I literally found someone from his special church. I wish I did it before because I would have had that. But I was like,
Right.
I found a guy that went to your special church. The same thing happened. So I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, I don't think that's a deterrent when you give women guns. Like, because
Right.
we can be emotional at times. Like, and it's just like when you pay women to do the wrong thing, I'm not surprised that women of
No, you
all
shouldn't be
races,
surprised at all.
religions, and socioeconomic backgrounds do it.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. Incentives matter. People respond to incentives. Like I said, conservatives used to know that. They used to build their whole policy program on that basis. One of the things too that bothers me all the time is when I talk to I'm an Orthodox Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So I talk to a lot of Christians. They say a lot of the same things. It's about picking the right woman. You just need to pick the right woman. And there's two versions of this. One is the long courtship, version, which says if you just vet a woman long enough, you can prevent all this risk. And the other one is if you're just alpha male enough, you can prevent all this risk. And of course, we've got all these alpha males, celebrities and sports stars that have these horrible divorces and their lives are ruined, and they're about as alpha as they come. But I think that fundamentally what's missing from the Christian analysis, the modern Christian analysis, is this. Women have free will, and modern Christians want to deny that. They want to act like women have no moral agency and they don't have a will. And somehow, if you're just alpha enough and Christian enough, you can take away the free will of your wife.
Well,
and it's just a preposterous idea.
Well, and the one study they always say is like, if you pray every day with your wife, that she won't leave. But okay, how does that go? So you say, "Dear, we're going to pray today." And she says, "No."
Right.
"Please pray today." She says,
Right.
"No." Again, are you going to put a gun to her head? What is, you can't.
How do you do it?
Or she says, "I really want to leave." And you say, "No, we're not leaving. We're staying married." And she says, "No, I want to leave, take your children, all your stuff. And in your case, transition your child." And you say, "No, we're not doing that." Well, what are you supposed to out alpha the state?
Yes.
Good luck. I mean, you're probably doing a better job than most guys in that situation with getting laws passed. But even in your case, it's incredibly difficult. Like, it's not.
I passed the laws in Texas to protect my son, and then the courts let her move to California where there's no law.
Yeah.
I mean, how much more can I do, Earl? Like, I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, I spent $1.6 million trying to stop this boy from being castrated. I spent $200,000 of my own money trying to get a law passed to protect him. That's not enough. I'm just going to tell you, if I can't do it, nobody can do it. You got to stay out of the system.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, a lot of these guys, they don't know that men close to them it's happening to, because men just aren't really loud about this kind of thing. Like, there's one media personality I had this argument with where he would always say, like, men need to man up, be more out, like the same arguments they use. He doesn't even know his driver is going through this. Like, his driver told me on the way from the airport. I don't want to say the name, but like, it's like his driver's going through the exact same thing, and they don't even
sounds
know.
like it might be up in the Northeast somewhere, but yeah, I get you.
Yeah. Oh, you might know then.
I might know.
Yeah.
I might even know the driver.
Yeah. Really nice. Like, what was he supposed to do? He was young. Like, he didn't know
Nothing
any better.
he can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's going to be enslaved to the system. That's how it is.
Yeah.
Like, one of the reasons that I have just decided I'm not paying child support, for example, is I just, as a moral issue, I can't have my resources go to castrate my kid.
Yeah.
I decided that when all this started, I decided, one, I was never going to lie in court. And two, I decided that I was never going to model immoral behavior for my son. And three, that my resources would never be used to hurt my son. So I'm at that point where I may have to just sit in prison so that my resources are not hurt for my son. Mm-hmm. But I'm just not going to participate in hurting my kid. But think about that for a second. The family courts are going to throw me in prison because I won't castrate my son. And I'm just telling you, if a system is that cracked, your only defense is to not be in it.
Yeah.
And our prospects of reforming it are at best decades off. And I don't know that it can be reformed. It's at best decades off.
I don't know. That's the same thought I had because I there's too many women that have just made really bad life choices where they have a ton of debt. And the only solution I think the government's going to come up with is to have men bail them out. They just can't. I would be surprised if we see homeless women in my lifetime. And if we do, I think they're going to legalize prostitution because that's the only way I think they'll get out of it.
You're right. I mean, I don't think a lot of people know. Child support is the largest transfer of wealth in the United States, and it's almost all from men to women. And it keeps women off the welfare rolls, and the government knows that it's going to have to pick up the difference if men don't pay child support. It's one of the reasons why I'm thinking about. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, I'm obviously not paying child support for moral reasons, but I've done the math in Texas. I think it's probably fairly applicable to other states. If 15% of men in Texas stopped paying child support, the whole system would collapse. They wouldn't be able to pay for the attorney general's attorneys to sue men for child support. The court systems portions of the court system would become defunded. I'm wondering if civil disobedience isn't a way to maybe get a rapid change in the system, or at least some accommodations in the system. What do you think?
So you've done.
Could you get men to do it, for one thing?
That's the question I have, because I'm thinking of it from an individual guy. Maybe, but you'd have to really sell it as if this would be effective. So I think that would be the challenge. You'd have to convince men that enough men would do it and that it would be effective.
Because you're going to go to jail if you do it. You're going to go to jail.
Yeah.
It's a civil rights kind of era thing. You have to be willing to go to jail.
Well, and how would you communicate that to enough men? Like, do you think you could get enough traction on somewhere like Twitter or the media? Like, what would be the way that you would communicate that to enough men?
I think the most of our guys are not heavy social media users.
Yeah.
I mean, I think most of them have to work 2 and 3 jobs. They're not living on Twitter or whatever. What I would probably do is, and I can probably make something like this. I've thought about doing it. Some system that would automatically go through public court records. And get the names and addresses of men who are paying child support, and just use that as a giant mailing list to create a political movement of men who are enslaved to the state, and basically model it on a slave revolt.
Is that public record?
It is public record.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I did not know that. That could potentially work.
Yeah. I think you could get, in Texas, you could probably get 1.5 million names. If you could mobilize, that's enough votes that you could probably get some change going. But I think civil disobedience, like, for example, I was put under a gag order prior to this ruling. Like, I got the ruling yesterday. Prior to yesterday, this podcast would have been illegal. Every podcast I've done would have been illegal. Because I was under a gag order saying I couldn't do any podcasts, newspaper interviews, television interviews. It was a lifetime ban from all media. I wasn't even allowed to write articles for newspapers or anything. Like, as a totally illegal and unconstitutional gag order. It was violating that gag order that was the basis for giving me supervised visitation, and it was an illegal order to begin with. I just told the judge 3 times in court in Dallas County. I told Bloody Mary, I am not going to follow the gag order. It's illegal. And I have contempt for the text of the order because it's offensive to me as a Texan. And I have contempt for you as a judge for issuing the order because you violated the Texas Constitution. So I'm in maximum contempt of court, and you're obligated to give me 18 months in the Lew Sterrett County Jail. And I begged her to put me in jail, and she wouldn't. She wouldn't put me in jail on contempt because she knew I'd go up on habeas corpus and win because it's a totally illegal order. She'd rather it sit there as evidence that she could use in temporary orders to take my kids away from me. You see what I mean?
Mhm.
So you have a situation where even in court, civil disobedience can lose you your kids. I
D
mean,
does e
standing up for your rights. In fact, if there are young men who are in family court right now, I would suggest, Pearl, um, that they go gently with the judges and go along with what the judge wants,
Mhm.
and try to make incremental changes over a period of about 5 years to improve their standing with their kids. Fighting the way I did, uh, creates a lot of opposition from the entire judiciary, not just the judge that you're with. Now, in my case, I didn't have a choice because they're going to castrate my kid, you
Mhm.
know. But if you're in a situation, it's probably best to be less strident.
You know what I think? You gotta get a hold Elon Musk replied to you. Has he messaged you at all?
He has not messaged me yet. He's been in the same situation. His child is alienated from him.
Mhm.
And what does it say though that a guy as powerful as Elon Musk loses his kid to this
Yeah.
in family court? What chance does the average guy have?
None. Well,
None.
what I'm wondering is if you, because I think it would help you if you had funding. Um, Not here, we're demonetized, guys. Go to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
theaudacitynetwork.com. Not here. But I was thinking if you got a hold of Elon Musk somehow, I mean, more resources couldn't hurt. Have you messaged him at all?
I have not. I have not. I hate to. I hate to like message him and bring up memories of his kid. I feel bad for him, man. I've watched him talk about it,
Hmm.
and his heart is pained by it, man. Like
Yeah.
he really is hurt by it. He's kind of like me. He likes being a dad.
Hmm.
He enjoys kids and he likes being a dad. Um, but maybe I'll do that. Maybe that's a wise piece of advice to talk to him about.
I mean, it's worth a shot. And
Yeah,
I think some people, when it affected them personally, it makes them feel better about it if they're actually doing
yeah,
something to change it.
yeah,
Worst case, he leaves you unseen,
yeah. That's
It's
right.
like that's
That's
it. Um, I
that's
have
right.
I have some comments I'm gonna read. Pearl, have you ever seen Marilyn York, the men's rights attorney? I think I have. Is that the woman that has like the commercials that are kind of funny? And it's something like, is your wife nagging on you? Or are you at the bar? Like something like that. If that's her, I've seen those, but it was a while ago. Tony says, question for him. Do you recommend men to avoid trying to date or have children?
Yeah, I think you do not want to have children in this system. You have to find a way to have children outside the system. Dating is perilous. Let me give you an example of someone I actually know in Houston. This involves some LGBT issues too. He had a coworker ask him out for a coffee. Turned out the coworker was gay and was actually hitting on him. And he just said, "Hey man, I'm straight. Appreciate the coffee and everything." Patted him on the shoulder and left. So in Texas, we have this kind of assault called assault by contact, and it just means offensive touching.
Mhm.
This guy got a domestic violence conviction for offensive touching because it was said to have occurred in a dating relationship. So I don't think a lot of men know all the domestic violence laws that are used against men in marriage can be used against you in a dating relationship. The way they've defined a domestic relationship includes dating. So you have a lot of the risks that you have in marriage. You don't have the risk of losing your property and all that stuff, but you do have the false domestic violence accusation problem in dating. So be very careful, is what I would advise.
What do you say to the men that say that that'll never happen to me? Your odds of that happening is like 1 in a million.
Well, if here's the thing. There have been a lot of studies done on false rape accusations, which I think um, are a lot worse and more rare than domestic violence accusations. The Air Force did a study, I think back in the 90s, and found that over 80% of those accusations could be proved false. Like that's with video evidence or DNA evidence. They didn't include ones that couldn't be proved false. So these are the ones that can prove false. So it turns out that false domestic violence accusations probably have an occurrence higher than insurance fraud, which is the most common crime in the world. So you can tell yourself that it's 1 in a million, but again, what they're relying on is this belief that women don't have free will and they don't respond to incentives. If a woman gets mad at you and wants to hurt you, this is the easiest way for her to do it, and she will.
You know, another thing that I think would potentially be effective, I think men should put women on child support and alimony as much as they can, because there's nothing we're better at than complaining.
Right.
And if enough women, because women are starting to make more money,
Of course.
how they're making more money, who cares? But we're making more money now, so essentially, there's more of an opportunity for men to put women on child support, like, you know, that Bad Bunny woman who made like 50 million on OnlyFans.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
if enough high-profile women get put on child support, you know, you could. I could see the laws maybe becoming more fair because women would complain so much, and we just tend to get our way more.
This is one reason why I support equal shared parenting laws, because the child support that these laws advocate considers the income of both parents and the amount of parenting time of both parents. And what you're saying is exactly what we notice, that women begin to pay more, women wind up paying child support more often. And suddenly we get calls for child support reform in those states. You know, no problem gets solved in America unless it's a problem for women. So I think it's always wise to make it a problem for women if you want change.
Yeah. The next comment was, I spent 2 hours with my son on his 10th birthday after paying his mom thousands of dollars. I don't even know where they live. By 2028, he'll be 16. I've only had 2 years with him since he was a little boy. Jacob Bratek says, yes, Marilyn is the one with the funny commercials. I think she'll be a good to interview. I think I've messaged her before. I don't think she responded. Well, do you think there's anything young men should know about the laws that maybe we haven't gone over? Anything that people can do to support your case?
Well, we haven't talked about paternity fraud, which is still a huge problem. And we haven't talked about maternity fraud. Maternity fraud is when a woman, you know, says that she's on child support, but really is contraception, but really isn't. So these kinds of fraud are absolutely rampant, you know. And in Texas, until I think it was 2006, if you were the husband in a marriage and there was a child born in that marriage by your wife, it was presumed yours, and there was nothing you could do about it. In 2006, we got laws that said you could challenge that with a DNA test, but only for 1 year. After 1 year, you can't challenge it again. And so millions of men in Texas are paying child support for children that aren't even theirs. So that's another risk that you have when you get married. And I don't think young men get this. You can get married. Your wife can have an affair and have a children by another man and make you pay and raise it. And after a year, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to pay for another man's kid. So there's risks like that, which are just enormously psychologically damaging to men when it happens. And there's nothing worse than a woman divorces you, takes her kids, marries another man who's now raising your kids, and you have to pay money into his household while he has sex with your wife and raises your kids. Like, that's the future risk that you're looking at. When it comes to helping me, the best way to help me, if you're interested in this issue and you care about kids that this is happening to, just work in your own community and get these things outlawed. Keep this stuff out of your schools. Get a law passed in your state the way I passed into my state and outlaw this stuff. So far, none of the conservative states are sanctuary states to protect children. So California has the transgender kidnapping bill. So when my son crossed the border of California, they'll never return him to Texas. Even on court order, they won't do it. We need conservative states to pass laws that make their states sanctuaries. You know, if a child enters the border of Texas will never return a child to California for gender affirming care. It'll never happen, no matter what a court orders. So we need to get our state laws being at least as efficacious as the laws of the pro-trans community. And the other thing is just, I think normalize criticizing transing kids in public. Like, talk about it openly, don't shrink from it. The fact is, I polled this issue in Texas and California. 80% of Democrats don't think you should trans kids. So we're in the great majority of people, and we need to normalize criticism of it. And that's what you can do for me, is just make your own community safe for kids.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry that this happened to you, this entire story. You're probably, of all that I've heard, I'm probably going to give you like the worst story I've heard. I had one guy in a similar position, but he ended up winning in court by some miracle of God.
Right.
Where can the people support you, find you?
Find me on X. It's at Jeff Younger Show. I don't actually have a show. That was just I felt my life had become so public. I felt like I was in the Truman Show, so I called it the Jeff Younger Show.
Okay.
And you can find me at my Substack, where I write in-depth articles about family court reform, about female hypergamy and the implications for young men. And that's just jeffyounger.substack.com.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. I wish you all the best of luck. I hope, maybe you get a new judge or something.
And maybe it's possible. Yeah.
Miracle.
Well, thank you. I really enjoy your show, and it was really great to actually be on it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Guys, also, if you want, we have so much footage of interviewing guys that are divorced or had negative